Hey everyone, Anders Sundquist here, host of the podcast Lean In. And today I have a couple boomerang guests. Thanks for coming back, gentlemen. It was an honor hosting you the first time, and this time a little fireside chat. And we're going to be talking about AI, specifically build versus buy, how TA leaders can run that calculus internally. And as it places the decision making on certain AI tools and features, we're going to end the talk talking about agents and what the heck is an agent? How can we use this to optimize our delivery here? So, many topics in between, but we're going to lead with that talk track here, gentlemen. So wanted to say thank you. Jeff Barker, you're in a new role since you joined. So welcome, VP TA at Engine. And I'll let you introduce a bit more of yourself in a moment. And Mark Grimwood, SVP of Global Sales and Distribution Recruiting and Global Talent Attraction. Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thanks both of you for joining. Didn't scare you away the first time. Want to say thanks for coming back to talk more specifically about these AI topics today. So, Jeff, why don't you jump in? So you have a new home here, new role. Maybe fill us in on what's new since you last joined Lean In.
Yeah. So last time I joined, I was with Abnormal AI. So I was in the cybersecurity space for just under 4 years, and then just at the end of last calendar year, joined Engine, which is a travel tech platform for B2B and a lot of unmanaged spend in travel for the SMB and mid market space. So we specialize in that. Joined at the end of last year and have been leading the talent team there. And yeah, it's been going great.
Welcome back, and also fill us in on your is an advisor, or you're also involved in another kind of AI TA tool. I want you to touch on that, and we'll come back in a moment.
Yeah, so I was recently privileged with joining the customer advisory board for Bright Hire. So been a Bright Hire user for about 4 years now. Huge fan of what they do, and just obviously a big believer in the founders, Teddy and Ben, and I've gotten to know them really well. And so yeah, it's fun because I get to meet with a lot of other TA leaders pretty often and talk shop like this and learn, all the struggles that we're all going through.
Awesome. Well, congrats on that. We'll come back in a moment and talk more about Bright Hire, what the tool does and what it is in the market segment and how it fits into the build versus buy. But first, without further ado, Mr. Grimwood, welcome back. How are things?
Having us. Yeah. Good to be back on here with you.
Yeah, welcome back. And so, what's new in your world since joining? Anything you want to update the audience on?
Yeah, I think it's a timely conversation that we're jumping into here. And I think, to Jeff's even the last point there, the ability to just bring TA leaders together and share ideas and share what's going on in all of our businesses. I think these conversations are so important because we're all going through it together, right? There's a lot of learning, there's a lot of trial and error. So to have these conversations where we can learn from each other and hear the ideas and hear what people are testing, I think that's how we're all going to learn and move it forward. So super excited for the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Both of you have a lot of wisdom. And so I greatly appreciate our conversations. And coming into this prep, I actually want to segue with this phrase, Jeff, that you said both you and Mark Grimwood used to use together. If you want to actually fill the audience in, you both know each other for more than a couple years.
This is a family show here, right? Yeah.
Whoa, no 4 letter words here. But you said something, and it's actually it really aligned with my ethos too about sort of the let's adopt the phrase from another company and you use your own, but bias for action. You were talking about having action versus maybe sitting on the sidelines in fear or trepidation or curiosity, but not getting started. And sometimes the hardest thing is just to get started. And I want that to be the opening comment for our talk about AI today, because I think that it is an important philosophy that TA and people leaders can use. So what was that phrase and what does it mean to you in both your organizations?
Yeah, I honestly, I think the phrase was just start. But I know Mark kind of shares that same mentality. I remember a post he wrote maybe like a year or so ago on quality of hire. And it's all these on LinkedIn, all these things that feel very intimidating because there's a lot of novelty. And I think we naturally think about the downstream repercussions if we get things wrong a lot of times because we understand that talent affects so many different areas of the business. It's like if we get these things upstream incorrect, like what are the downstream effects of that? So yeah, the just get start kind of method or just start methodology or mindset is like we're not going to build the perfect thing right out of the gate. We're going to learn a ton if we just get started because I think you can get that sort of analysis paralysis if you stay at the beginning or the starting line too long.
Well said, Mark. So that phrase, I see some head nods, and from what I know about you, that certainly is a true mantra. What does that mean to you and your organization?
Yeah, I heard an interesting line couple of weeks ago where action absorbs anxiety. And I'm like, yes, like I couldn't agree more. It's like just start taking action. Like there, you sort of mentioned it. There's a lot of anxiety around what's to come and what can these tools do and what can't they do. And the only way, especially at where we're at in the life cycle of all this technology, the only way to get in there and understand it is just by playing with it, right? And being okay with sort of failing forward in the idea of like it might not work, but it's like every single action is a data point. Could be a good data point, could be a bad data point, but at least you now know more than you did before you tried it, right? You need a culture that allows for that, right? And I think that's where leadership really comes in to give your team and the people in your organization or on your team that permission to go and try it and not have that expectation that every single thing you're going to try is going to produce a 10x outcome. That might not be the case, but what do you learn from it? What can you take away from that that you're going to be able to leverage in another way? Where we are right now, it's like we need everybody just sort of leaning in and taking those chances and calculated risks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I'm going to segue with a topic that brings us to build versus buy. But first, I want to say, I hear kind of a mantra or a theme. I'm talking to talent leaders day in and day out. And there's this knowledge gap with adoption. Maybe not a knowledge gap, but there's an adoption delta between people just getting started and people not. How do you and your organizations get your teams to just start if there is that cohort that doesn't know where to start? Mark, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it starts with the leadership as well. Like there is a top-down approach of like showing that you're trying it and testing it. I think, when we were talking in the lead up to this call, you were talking about how you've been doing some quad coding and trying to build your own apps. And I'm like, I got to get in there and do that as well. I'm like, I don't know the first thing about building an app or anything like that. But it's like, that's not the point. The point is to understand how the technology works and where there are limitations. This isn't all about the outcome, right? So it's like, I think you have to model that behavior and have a top down approach, but then you do need that bottom up approach as well, where the people that are in the trenches that are doing the work, they see where the inefficiencies are. Right. So it's like, you got to tell them, show me what you're doing, right? Like, what tools
Yes.
are you using? What technologies are out there? Actually, earlier this week, I sat down with some of our SDRs, our sales development reps that came through our Future Force program. So they're new grads to hear about how they're using AI in their day to day. And I'm like blown away by how they are integrating it. And I'm like, there is definitely like that reverse mentorship idea around
Yeah.
this topic that I
The
think is
student
super
becomes the
powerful.
teacher, huh? So actually, let's hone in on that a little bit before moving to you, Jeff. Mark, what did you see? What did you hear? How are they using AI in the SDR space?
It's just so natural, right? It is almost like that is their first step is to go to AI and to leverage it, whether that's to, help write the email or schedule a follow-up or whatever that part in their process might be. There is a natural inclination of how does AI help me? Whereas for me, I'm like, okay, what problems am I having? Can AI solve it? Or do I go a different path based on like what has historically worked for me? Right. So there's a little bit of unlearning that I'm trying to do to be like, hey, AI first, can that help me? Or what is the potential for it to help me? If I don't even know the answer, it's like, I at first and see if there is an answer. They are just so naturally thinking that way. And they're pretty agnostic as to like what tools they're using. They might use multiple tools for multiple reasons. Just on keeping up with it all. It's a lot, but they're doing it every day. So there is definitely some learning I'm taking from it.
That's a very humble comment to say, that, and the student becoming the teacher is a comment about humility where you can learn from more junior folks entering their career, but they've been exposed to technology since birth. Jeff, what are you seeing? How does that resonate? And then we'll tie this into the build versus buy leadership mentality in a moment.
Yeah, so the it is a lot, and I always have this. We went through the process at Abnormal for about 2 years of like let everyone play with everything, and that was cool because you did learn a lot from like front edge intelligence, like Mark's talking about, like what are they bringing back. One of the problems that we ran into after a couple of years though was that people were building a lot of like similar things,
Yeah.
but it like there was already something that someone else was doing that was better. So like everyone, was trying to build an agent that could like scrape their, feedback and like put it into an email or put it into Slack and like send it to the hiring manager or whatever, these little use cases. So it was the irony of it is we thought we were becoming more efficient, but we were becoming more inefficient. And so one of the lessons I learned is you do have to find that balance that Mark's talking about of tops down and bottoms up. And what I view my responsibility is to go in and say, let's be really clear about like what problems and inefficiencies we want to solve. So like we did it, we just listed out, and it was ugly. It was like 45 inefficiencies in the TA funnel, right? Just stuff that legacy we're so used to doing ourselves. But I'm like, it doesn't feel good. No one enjoys doing it. And then once we did that, we started to define like, what are the kind of 2 or 3 value tiers here? There's like a value that is get rid of my manual work, but then there's like also this value of aggregating data and gleaning insights from it and like making better business decisions. And so we're trying to get into like defining those. And then
Yeah.
once we had that, we were able to say to recruiters, here's the roadmap. Like don't try to do it all because it is too much. And like I always have this vision of my kids when I tell them they can pick something out and we're in like plaid pantry and they're like, my God, I can just pick out whatever I want. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
too
yeah,
much. It's
yeah.
and so we've really gotten to the point where we're saying, hey, Q1, we're gonna start automating scheduling. How are we gonna do that?
Nice.
What is the steps we need to take? Now, if you want to go play in the sandbox, so to speak, and come up and bring ideas from that front edge intelligence to us, awesome. But play in that sandbox. Don't just play in all the sandboxes.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
a little bit more prescriptive, but I think that I've learned the lesson that without that, you can actually be a little bit counterproductive in your AI development of your department.
That's a
Well
good.
said.
There's just two sides to it, right? Where there's like an organizational roadmap around it, where I love that idea of like, what are we trying to solve? Like, let's play in that space. And then there's like the individual AI fluency, AI, skill set that you have to adapt. And sometimes it's going to cross over and
Totally.
sometimes it's not. So it's like, go play. Some of the things that you learn and you're progressing on might not fit with the organizational side, and that's fine. So it's like not every idea is going to get a priority or get investment, but it's still going to help you maybe grow and understand it. But here are
Totally.
key criteria. I think that's a great point you're making around setting those guardrails a little bit and differentiating that. I think is super.
Yeah, well said. And Jeff, when you were describing the boil the ocean approach, that, it's not necessarily wrong to just get started, but if everyone's building redundant agents and features or apps, then that in a way there is some waste there. But I want to bring us to the topic of build versus buy. And Jeff, when we were prepping for this, there was this talk about like, it makes sense for individuals to build individual processes or agents that help them do their own individual workflow. Maybe that is scheduling or helping find nuanced candidates through a sourcing agent from a rec they qualify with the stakeholder. Maybe it's drafting email replies to candidates and whatever it might be. But it might not make sense for, a sourcer to try and build a talent intelligence tool at enterprise scale that, maybe BrightHire's built a better version and you should buy that. And we were talking about the build versus buy calculus. And I was curious to learn a little bit more about, in your advisory role and what a talent intelligence tool can do and why it might make sense as a stakeholder to invest in some tools and spaces and then have your team build their own widgets and agents that are more small scale. Fill us in on that like calculus decision and how a tool like a BrightHire, there's others out there, might make more sense to buy in this circumstance and the value that they add. There's not necessarily more hires, but more talent dense, quality of hire, measurable teams.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and I know that this is sort of a platitude, but it's like the burden of leadership is just evaluating the trade-offs. And so when we're talking about the build versus buy, it's like, what's the problem? How urgent is it? What is our liability if we try to build it ourselves? Has someone done it better? So I think you just have to be sort of sober about the trade-offs. There's a lot of like, there's some hero ball happening of like, I want to go build something myself. And then it's like, well, that's cool. And if we do that, what do we lose in timing, or what do we lose that someone's already done it better, basically? So because even though there's a value to building it natively, that's not a free build. I think that's maybe the mistake that sometimes I
Yeah.
hear that I've made personally, and that I hear other TA leaders is like, well, let's just build it ourselves. It's like time that it still costs money. You still have to have those resources go and do that. So if it costs 30 grand a year to go purchase X product, or it costs our engineering team X amount of time to go and spin this up and then refactor it and then iterate on it, it's like, what's the cost benefit there? So that's how I try to look at it, is through that lens of just the trade-offs and how urgent the problem is.
Yeah. And just because you could build it doesn't mean you should, right? Like to your point, Jeff, it's like, as an organization, where does building these products fit in your priority list? Because it always takes longer than you would think. There's always more resources. Is that where you want to be spending that money versus bringing in a partner that is then going to take on a level of risk for you, right? That is going to help build. It just gets so much more complicated that yes, there's always going to be, there's always a use case for the build, but I think that buy component, especially in HR tech, where you're dealing with a lot of different legalities and especially in global situations, it's like, do you want to take all of that on? Is that what's really going to move your business forward versus bringing in a trusted partner? And, obviously you mentioned Bright Hiring, those guys are great. They know that space. Are you going to do it faster, better here than they are doing? You know what I mean? And what's that trade-off? It's a tough one for sure.
Totally. Well, and I think a lot of HR tech companies right now are trying to build their roadmap based off of that. Like now that co-work is out there, now that people are using Claude Code more, and now that people are doing internal builds more often, like how do they invest in their own roadmaps? Like whether do they get an internal MCP? Do they start to go, like, is it really, it's kind of the juice worth the squeeze there, because if people are going to build it themselves. So it is a really interesting inflection point we're at, where first we saw like the AI rush to market where everyone just built something really fast and 90%
Yeah.
of it didn't work for shit. Like
Yeah.
now I think we're in this really unique position where those HR tech companies are having to kind of have their feet held to the fire and be like, how do we deliver more value for our customers so that they don't build it themselves? And how do we maybe double down on the things we're great at and not try to be like everything for everyone?
One question about AI and just the exchange of information comes to mind, not necessarily building software, building agents, building processes, but in either of your organizations or even just anecdotally, how has AI changed information exchange? Where historically you might have had someone email or Slack appear and say, hey, what's the update on this rec, or what's the comp range, or what's the geo or something? And then there's this gap. Do your organizations use like a knowledge center in an AI of choice, ChatGPT in a project or in a Claude project where you like have company knowledge that then has reduced friction with information exchange? Is that something that you're seeing, Jeff?
Yeah. Oh, go
Take
ahead,
that
Jeff.
one first.
All right, I'll jump in because it's something that's near and dear to your heart. Is Slack. And Slackbot for us, right, is such a differentiator because it does that, right?
Yeah.
It grabs all of your data, all of your information, and you can have those prompts. You can ask it for that information, and it's going to sort of surface it up to you. But I definitely, again, all these organizations, you all have data everywhere, whether it's your ATS and, if you have a CRM and all of that, but like, what is that system of engagement that you're using that brings all of those tools together? For us, that's Slack. And then Slackbot on top of that gives us that AI interaction that allows us to work with it in real language, right? And we can ask for what we need and it gets surfaced to us in the area that we're doing our work every day. So that is such an important differentiator for how we work and how we actually maximize that AI capability.
Yeah, and I'll say, and for those who don't know, that's actually where Mark and I know each other from. Is I have Slack is near and dear to my heart, both as a company and as a product, and it's our central nervous system at Engine. I mean, it's how, like, people rarely check email, so everything goes through Slack. And Slackbot's been really helpful for us. And even when I was working at Slack, the number one thing, no matter how good people were at the organization of it, is that speed, right? So the ability to make sure that things aren't slipping through the cracks, because you can miss one at from your boss and 3 days later, they're sitting there waiting for an answer on some data that they need. And so having the ability for Slackbot, at the drop of a hat, or having that in a channel where it can say, give me a summary of what's happened, or catch me up here, or what are my 4 action items today? I think what Slackbot has helped us do, besides all the great automations and workflows and things you can do in it, connecting it to other apps, but Slackbot specifically is like, since COVID, we needed a way for like the human being to catch up to the technology, because
Yeah.
going fully remote just happened so fast. And like, I just don't feel like people fully caught up. And Slackbot has helped. I mean, even in the morning, it'll be like, you've got this. And here's like the 4 things you need to do.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it's just it's just helping us be more organized, and it's really worked really fantastic for us at Engine too.
What's coming up for me is this we're experiencing a change, and I think we haven't yet seen how we consume technology due to this change in AI. It's making me think of, ChatGPT and Claude now have, to me, it feels like an app store. I think they have their own language around connectors, right? And, connecting your LLM of choice into Slack. And now you can, beyond the, Slack bot, which is incredible, talk to an LLM. And if you choose, you can integrate Claude or ChatGPT into Slack and ask questions. You can be talking to a stakeholder, requalifying a rec, and be slacking the world's smartest AI and have candidates sourced for you in moments. And I guess what I'm saying is, like, this has all changed how we work, and we're still catching up to it, regardless if you've been experimenting and building apps for some time, or you're just listening to this podcast and you're like, okay, I'm going to start today. I'm going to download ChatGPT or Claude, and I'm going to actually create an account and start to use it in my workflows. There's no wrong place. I think the wrong thing to do might just be, forgive me if you're a Luddite, but it might just be not choosing to participate, because I do think that it's here. I do think, similar to the internet and email and those revolutionary changes, that it is embedded in our workflows now forever, and adoption is almost not an option at this point. So I want to segue this into the topic of fraud, the F word, and the F word, especially as it relates to a couple of scary topics. As TA leaders, one of our jobs is to protect the organizations that we're helping hire for. And we're, especially with AI applicants and fraudulent applicants, this is becoming a very hot topic, and it's now just omnipresent. I think since the COVID era, it's become clear that remote first organizations are being targeted more than others. And even, any organization is liable to experience this. I want to open this conversation with a couple stats. And I've talked about this on the show before, but it's so important to be aware of where this is going. So Gartner predicts that by 2028, 1 in 4 candidate profiles worldwide will be fake. So 25% of candidates will be fake. Let that simmer for a second. And then looking at last year, and a tangible metric of the impact of fraud is 1 in 4 managers estimated their company lost more than $50,000 from fraudulent hires, also a stat from Gartner. So just in 2025, we saw, 1 in 4 experience a 50K loss from a mishire or a fake hire or whatever category of fraud it was. And then by 2028, quarter of candidates will be fakes. I just want to open with, how does this resonate? How did we get here? And then we'll talk about some nuances of where this is going. But Mark, I see your head nodding, and Salesforce must have thousands of applicants in a year. So you're seeing this at scale. Tell us the tone internally.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's top of mind for everybody right now. I think I'll be interested in Jeff's perspective, being a bit more directly in the security space in his time. But I do think, selfishly for the TA org, it really hits home that this is why you need structured, standardized interview processes,
Yeah.
right? Like, it really comes back to some basics. Like, there's going to be a lot of like other fraud detection, and there's interesting technologies, and there's a lot of shifts that Jeff will be able to speak to more eloquently than I will. But even at the bare bones of it, it's like, it really does come back to having that tight process in place to make sure you have everything in place possible to start to spot where there's inconsistencies or where you start to see some fraudulent activities. And have you created a space that, number one, your employees can recognize that, right? Because you need everybody aware. You're not going to have a singular technology or a singular department that can own this. Like, you need every member of your organization, like, aware, alert, see something, say something, because it is that prevalent. Like you're talking about, 25% of all applicants. Like, if you are working in a scattered environment, how are you catching those signals? Right? Because they're getting better and better at hiding it. So you need to have the process in place to be able to capture that as much as possible. So I think that there is something that comes back to HR departments, recruiting departments, on, are we structured to be able to capture some of this and see when things get out of place, and how do we rectify that, or how do we flag that upwards? But Jeff, what are you seeing? You're even closer to this.
Yeah, I mean, the 25% stat that you brought up, well, first of all, I'll say, I think for sure some companies get targeted way more than others. And so I would bet Salesforce is in that first bucket, but cybersecurity definitely gets targeted because of the amount of customer data that it's privileged with. And so, yeah, at one point in beginning of 2025, we were seeing that 1 out of every 4 that we had just on the engineering side at Abnormal were fraudulent. So process, 100% agree with what Mark's saying. it sucks in some ways because TA partners feel like now I need to be some fraud sleuth. That's
Yeah.
now I have to be a security analyst. But we worked through that kind of change management and sort of the fear that they had of, oh my gosh, like what if someone gets through, and it's like put the guardrails in place. But ultimately it's a really tight, there's two sides of it. There's the people side and the tool side. The people side is have a really tight triangle of people operations, so HR, and then TA, and then IT. So our IT, like those three components, we're meeting every single week. And we actually, this is one of those instances where we opted to build something internally that would triangulate IP address and then actually look at the greenhouse record and see what is the link. What does the LinkedIn profile say they're from, and where's the greenhouse where they actually applied in greenhouse? So it took those three locations, and it's like, okay, Fort Lauderdale, Brooklyn, and Lagos, Nigeria. Like these three things are not the same, right? And then we were really fortunate too. Our CIO, we built an automated list that would get updated from the FBI that was like known handles of North Korean threat actors. So there's the technology side and then there's the people side. I think you have to find ways to interconnect those two. And then to give the TA partners that safety net that Mark's talking about, that's like, hey, you're a master of your craft. Like, do the next right thing, see something, say something, have an escalation path, like all those different checkpoints. But I'm actually pretty surprised that there isn't. I've heard a few things about Tofu and a few other companies, but like I haven't demoed them. But nothing I saw, at least when I was at Abnormal, was like this company has nailed it. Like this company's nailed candidate fraud.
So I want to talk a bit about the people escalation path, just to clarify a little more. If you're tuning in today and want to know what Jeff and Mark have done with their teams or what they advise, let's unpack that a little bit more. And what I mean is, like, if you're a sourcer or a recruiter and you come across a candidate that you're like, this looks like fraud, this looks like maybe you just finished an RPS and the person isn't who they say they are. We all saw the viral post, and maybe it's taboo to do this, but the viral post was something around having the candidate say something derogatory about Kim Jong-un, I think. And it was like a satire. I don't know if it was true or not, but the point being that they were trying to catch someone that was from a bad actor, right, in the act. And that's how they did that, because the person refused to. Again, on social media, I can't confirm if it's true or not, but what is the appropriate escalation path, Mark, at Salesforce, or just in general, if someone is doing an RPS, catches fraud in the act, how would they then follow up appropriately with their organization, protecting them?
Yeah, for us, we have a dedicated IT security team that, again, starting with leadership on communicating this out and making sure that everyone is aware to be on the lookout, but here are your different paths. Like we have certain situations, like what are likely triggers that you should be looking out for? Hey, a salesperson that doesn't have a LinkedIn address, for example, it's like
Right.
that's not like a clear tell, but it's like, how many of those exist in this world, right? It's
Yeah,
like, so it's like,
yeah.
it doesn't always have to be like the deep technology pieces, because we sort of have teams that are probably running a lot of that. But like when you're talking to someone and you hear or see something that is a little off, again, our recruiters have interviewed hundreds, thousands of people, and then you start to see, but they can't talk to like what school they went to, or there's inconsistencies in how they're walking through their work history in ways that like they should know this based on their seniority level, and like what is on paper doesn't match what you're hearing. Like know when that's up, right? And it's just building that awareness of like your gut on it, because you've seen so many people, you've talked to so many people. If something's off, probably is, right? The stats would suggest it. So here, send an email. Use our professional team rather than like try to like dig into it with yourself to like catch the person.
Yeah.
It's like, hey,
Well,
I wouldn't go down that path. Like the satire one, it's like, that's funny to read on LinkedIn, but I got to tell my team, like, don't spend your time doing it, right? Like if you even have a concern, send it off to someone else to look into it. Even if it comes back, it's like, no fraud there. It's like, I'd rather 10 times they come back and say, no, that wasn't, than miss the one, right? So it's like, there's nothing wrong with sort of raising that flag, because everyone wants to sort of help make sure that we're safe here.
well said.
Yeah,
Jeff?
and Anders, I don't know if you and I talked about this the last time around, but one thing that I've done and that we're starting to do at Engine also is when you don't have dedicated teams, or maybe like for the TA leaders who are at smaller companies like Series B that are just getting started, and it is kind of a bootstrapped operation. One of the things you can do, as long as you have an ATS, is We went into each scorecard and we made it so that it's a mandatory question that the recruiter has to respond to before they can submit the scorecard. Is we just asked the question, have you checked the LinkedIn and cross-referenced it with the CV location? And was there anything about this candidate, or the way that, to Mark's point, the way that they explained their work history or story, that gives you reason to believe that they could be a threat actor, or misrepresenting, or a fraudulent candidate. And so what we did is, when we had that, they had to check yes or no. If anything was a yes, we automated like a weekly audit that would get sent to a Slack channel that IT was in. And so IT would actually be able to review that list of like, okay, this week we have 11 candidates. And it gave the TA partners enough of a breather where they could say on the call, if they weren't quite sure, they could say like, hey, you'll hear from us within a week about next steps. Then we could have that audit and that automated workflow to IT. IT could review that and say, this is pretty suspicious. I'm looking at the IP address that they have submitted from in Greenhouse. Let's not move them forward, and let's actually mark their email handle as bad in our ATS. And so we found some ways to be able to do that. And then another way is like, just make it mandatory, make it really loud on your application. If you're a smaller company, make it really loud that you're going to do reference checks where you check IP addresses and like where the computer actually is stationed. Because what we found when we did that is that all these, basically farms that they have in Nigeria and North Korea, we can actually see where the computer is, where the laptop is, not even just the IP address. Because if they're using a VPN, right, they can send that all over the place.
Yep.
See where the device is, and we would say really loudly on our application, it basically was like a, don't waste your time with us, like, we're going to
Yeah.
check this stuff, we're not
Yeah.
going to hire you.
Yeah.
And so we tried to put some gates in place that were like, it's exactly what Mark said about the gut intuition and the be a professional. And we just needed to find ways that we could kind of bootstrap like a mechanism for it, because we couldn't just rely on like, well, everyone tries their best. Like, we needed to have some sort of system there.
And I'd just say to think, telling those stories, right? Like when you find it, you want to sort of build that confidence in the team around like that they should bring it up. So it's like, whether it's successful or not, I think it's, again, I'm just sort of thinking through people watching this is like, as leaders, like what can you do? It's like, you got to build that culture where this becomes normalized, right?
Yeah.
So it's like when people on your team are doing it, it's like, you got to bring those examples and those stories to life so that they're not sitting there being, oh, should I do this? It's like, if you've heard of like 5 other people on your team doing it over the last year, you're that much more inclined to just go with it, right? Versus it seeming like this one-off thing that you necessarily, I don't know if it is or isn't. You want that natural gut instinct to just be like, doesn't matter, I'm just going to send it off or flag it, and someone else can figure out if it's real or not.
And think of how our worlds have changed for us and our teams, right? During the ZERP era, I don't know the percentage of fraud, but I would imagine it was significantly lower. And now 25% of applicants being fraudulent, that's just omnipresent. And from what I understand, it's across domains. Tech tends to be targeted more, I think, because of the access to data, and then also compensation correlated depending on the bad actor in play. But fraud also pertains to someone that's pretending to be someone that they're not, with credentials they don't have. It's not necessarily a bad actor, raising money for the North Korean army. Sometimes it's just someone claiming to have gone to university they didn't, or working at a place that they didn't. And so that's the state of the world that we're in today. And what we're talking about is empowering and protecting our employers and our employees. But it's safe to say, so if there's this level of fraud, that this would be changing relationships between TA teams internally and their stakeholders, because it's taking so much time now, right? It's taking so much time. And so, curious to ask just anecdotally what you're seeing about relationships changing between recruiting teams, sourcer, RCs, recruiters, and the stakeholders because of this AI era, and perhaps fraud being a part of that. Let's call that a byproduct of the AI era that we're in. But, I often hear stories around how AI is either helping recruiters have better relationships with stakeholders because they have more time and AI can automate tasks, or, and both can be true here, TA teams sometimes are anemic and they're stretched thin and they're carrying more recs than ever, and there's more spinning plates and load balancing is tough. Anecdotally, what is your reality? What are you seeing in your spheres? What's it like? Mark, let's start with Salesforce. In the AI era, how have relationships changed with TA teams and stakeholders?
Yeah, and I'd say it's still early in the journey,
Yeah.
right? I think the ideal and where it's going still sounds better than maybe where we're at yet today. right? Like when I think about the automation around everything from like maybe interview feedback to competitive intelligence that we can pull through, our different AI tools that we can then surface up to hiring managers. Like the pieces are coming together, and that's like, it is going to really change that relationship. I think it's going to allow TA professionals to be that much more of a true business partner where we're
Yes.
focused on outcomes, not just hires, but it's how these hires are driving the business outcome. If we're in a competitive situation with a candidate and just being like, hey, not only are we competing in the business lens, but then we're competing for that same talent. And if we can really tie that story together, as there's a lot of tech company, it's a competitive tech market right now,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
It is hyper competitive out there from the sales side as well as from the talent side. And if we can weave those stories together and arm hiring managers with our differentiators, because when they're talking to candidates, it isn't just about getting that job. It's about how we're supporting customers and how we're really allowing the businesses that we work with to thrive. That's the differentiator. So we got to tie it to outcomes, not just in making the hires. And AI is giving us that tool to educate that hiring manager and give them a little bit more rather than just, hey, here's their previous, track record of success and what made them successful. It's like, that's great, but can you translate it in? How are they going to help us support our customers differently in the next 3 years as AI infiltrates our customers, right? And helps them grow and support them. It's like TA has a really interesting opportunity to be that conduit to start thinking about how the talent coming in is really driving business success.
Jeff, before moving to you, actually, I want to double click, Mark, on a question as it relates to AI impacting sales organizations. We're talking all day about AI changing TA teams, people teams, right? But you're the SVP of sales recruiting at Salesforce, the largest CRM, right? It's like, you might know better than anyone. How is AI accelerating or changing the SDR BD space?
Yeah, I'm actually pretty jealous of the tools that our sales team have, right? Because the sales structure is very similar to a recruiting structure, right?
Very
Like there's
similar. That's why I
a
asked.
a lot of similarities. And so when I hear, our CEOs talked about how we've had hundreds of thousands of leads on the sales side that never got processed because we didn't have the human capacity to go through it.
Interesting.
That is just dollars left on the table
Yeah.
pure as a lack of capacity, right? So now we have SDR agents that are going through 50,000 leads a week and just cranking through them to actually get that touch. And it could be anything from responding back with an email to producing a quote, but it's that initial touch point that previously we didn't have the human capacity to get to. So to see, a real tangible example of that, I'm like, hey, who else has leads that we struggle to get through all of them? Right. I'm like, we have over 1 million applicants every single year. And it's like, we don't get to the percentage that I would like us to get to with human capacity because it's just not doable. So you see the comparisons, but on the sales side, they're definitely further ahead because the technologies are being built on the tech stacks that they work in today. Whereas on, the TA side, that tech stack isn't quite as connected as it is on the sales side, but we can sort of see where some of this is headed, right? And we're seeing some of the use cases around engagement, around lead qualification, and it's just like, it's coming, right? And it's really exciting. There's still a little bit of a chasm to cross over. And a lot of it comes down to sort of the tech stack of it all, but it's really exciting to see where it's going.
Yeah.
And that's a great point, Jeff. And there's just a huge opportunity now, though. And when you think of the recruiter of the future, that skill of critical thinking, of curiosity, and of storytelling, like those three to me just really stand out because, like we talked about, Anders, that AI piece is going to be democratized, right? Like
Yes.
everyone have access to
Yes.
ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and all of that. So that collection of that data is now being, like, Jeff, to your point, like every single recruiter now has that data surfaced to them. What are you doing with it? Right? Like,
Yes.
how are you then influencing? How are you translating what's there into tangible results? Your top recruiters are really going to be able to differentiate themselves and become like that truly trusted partner because they're not spending their time like trying to find the data and losing so much productivity just getting to that point. Now they're getting that. And it's like, okay, what do we do with this? Right? What can I bring to the sales leaders to help influence them, to help show productivity increases or whatever the goal is that you're trying to get out of it? That's where you need the critical thinking and the curiosity to really go be able to deliver on that and be able to tell that story.
That was Jeff. I think you dropped a knowledge bomb there that I think is, I'm going to use the word encouraging for if you're a junior, sourcer or recruiter tuning in today and want to learn. I heard two things, and threading in the first comment about the phrase you gentlemen have shared for many years is just start, along with curiosity. And I'm going to use the word curiosity as we segue and the closing portion of the show, which is, that recruiter, that anecdote that you just shared, they had access to some data. They might have had a stakeholder who was obstinate, or maybe there was low pass-through rate, took the data, dumped it into their LLM of choice and said, what trends or patterns do you see? It took 8 seconds, give or take. And they had a strong sort of advisory position to that stakeholder on how they can optimize that interview process. And I would reckon that it was improved. And so it's democratizing. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, we are humanizing the LLM of choice, and whatever your organization uses, you just use it. They all have relatively similar results for the kind of work we're doing. We're not building, complex software like right now as TA teams, nor are we being asked to. But it might be a nice segue, actually, is where will TA teams be in the future with the, and when we first planned this this podcast, I want to use the word agent and OpenClaw. That was a virally popular bot that was just released, and it was changing the world at the time. And then OpenAI, I think, bought them from some acquihire, and it still remains. But how will this AI era change TA teams for the sourcer, the recruiter, 3 years from now, a few years from now? What's the crystal ball say?
No, go. Let's get it started. I want to hear them.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, the orchestration. It's going to be a big one. Human and agent orchestration is going to be. You're
Yeah.
going to hear a lot about it over the next 12 months for sure. I just really think that the human skills become that much more prevalent, right? Where it's no longer those that have the easiest access to data, because we're all going to have that access. I think that there's a study that Procter and Gamble did where they basically piloted groups working together, subject matter experts working alone, and then like people with sort of less knowledge working with AI. And basically they found that those people that are working with AI were able to produce at the same rate as subject matter experts, even though they have significantly less knowledge in that space. So that access to knowledge and that access to data, that's going to be a lot more streamlined and a lot more democratized. Now it's those human skills around decision making and, like we talked about, the storytelling. Like, I think that is just going to really stand out as I think about even how we support our customers. Our customers need help, right? They need support. They need someone that can come in and not just sell them a technology that is going to help them, but like guide them through all the steps along the way to get to that end of productivity. There's multiple technology stacks that can help them get there, but who's going to actually like walk them through all that in between? And that comes down to relationships. Who do they trust is going to get them there? Who do they trust is going to make sure that we have their priorities top of mind, that we're thinking about their cybersecurity, that we're thinking about all these different components? You only establish that through conversations, through meetings, through understanding pain points and what's working and what's not working. So all that time that all of that is created is human time, right? That's human to human connection. And that is just going to be so important moving forward, because the access to data is going to be there. Who can do something with it is going to be the skill set of the next 24 to 36 months before it all changes again on us. But I think that we're going to see that is just going to be so critical moving forward.
Yeah, well said. And just quick comments to wrap it up is, I think you touched on it, Mark, is how will it change in the next 12 to 18 months? I think we don't yet know. As the models that are released change how we work with them, I think that will be a determining factor. We hear about the Anthropic model, I think it's called Mythos, and it's so powerful. And as it relates to, security and pen testing and being able to potentially break into, if you will, systems that are supposed to be secure. Well, can we release that to the public yet? And what if we do? So what's the next model and the next model? What will the power be? I don't know, but I can speak to trends today simply that I'm seeing a trend in organizations that AI fluency is required in interviews. If you rewind 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when, potentially like Excel was new, or maybe it was longer than that, but the softwares of the the .com bubble era, where these were all new tools, I think we'll start to see that as part of interview requirements, and it will change over time. But to Jeff's point, I do think that term orchestrator and that agent orchestration is going to be something that's part of our normal lives. It's almost like we'll have a suite of assistants. And how can you optimize your time by eliminating all manual tasks and doing what your core role is, which is taste and judgment and relationships in recruiting for the most part, right? Meeting candidates, meeting stakeholders, making hires. And part of it will be managing agents. And that might change how we do that. It might be it might not be Mythos, it might be some new model, but I think that that's here to stay, the concept of managing software agents. We're at our time, team. We could talk for another hour about this, but I want to say any parting words, final thoughts, and a note of gratitude for joining.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Anders, thanks for having us. Yeah, really appreciate it. I think, the action observes anxiety is just what we got to anchor on. And just the more people are engaging with the tools and trying things out within sort of the right parameters and sharing it, I think that's the one takeaway for everyone for sure, is that's what's going to allow you to adopt it that much faster and build that AI fluency that I think is going to be crucial for all of us, right? It's not even like within your own individual org, like me hearing from Jeff and from you,
Yeah.
there's things I'm taking away. I'm like, oh, we're not doing that as well. You know what I mean? We got to think about that within our own org. Like it really is all of us in it together as in the TA function as well. So appreciate you bringing us both on here.
Thanks, Mark. Jeff. Likewise. And maybe we can do round 3 next year and see how the world's changed. But for now, thanks again for coming back, gentlemen. Jeff, Mark, it's been an honor. Thanks everyone for tuning in to Lean In. Take care.